Makima and Kenjaku are their series' flagship mastermind villains whose ability to manipulate the world around them completely upends and takes control of the entire plot more than once. So why, in a world where people compare JJK to CSM so frequently for its world building, story elements, and characters, do these two rarely get a great spotlight on them and their similarities? I mean, it feels like it should be a shoo-in for a perfect discussion. Denji and Yuji, Devil Hunters and Sorcerers, Curses and Devils, Me and Prime LeBron, so why not Makima and Kenjaku? My name is Josh, I'm the host of Beyond Media, and in this video we'll be analyzing Makima, Kenjaku, and the hidden nature of Shonen Masterminds. To say that these characters share a lot of similarities would, I think, be an understatement. Both characters serve as a major antagonistic force within their world, and they both fall under the same character archetype of a mastermind manipulator with knowledge worth of generations of information. Both manage an organization of sorts, and both exist in a narrative where an opposing character upholds the title of the strong— wait, what the heck, that's true. What? Okay, wait, let's note that down for the future. Additionally, Makima and Kenjaku have plans on a global scale, and their fingerprints are present in pretty much every corner of the story. But what's interesting is that even though they logically share these similar identities, they feel like very different characters. We could throw out basic character elements on a whiteboard and you wouldn't be able to guess which of the two I'm talking about because they're so similar, but I think it's the application of these ideas that make them feel so distinct and unique within their role. So I've identified three very important distinctions that I think cause so many people to overlook this particular duo when these two series are so commonly compared. First is the way they manipulate things. While Kenny and Makima do have grand plans in action, one of the two implement their particular manipulations in a much more intimate way. Claiming that out of the pair, Makima is more emotionally and intimately manipulative is not a strange claim. While she is moving things along in the background, her overall scheme doesn't require the obscene levels of planning that Kenjaku's does, but it does require an intense and constant emotional manipulation. The first time we see something like this is in chapter 18 in the manga or episode 4 of the anime when Power moves in with Denji and Aki. When Aki calls Makima to ask why she needs to take care of Power, she says that it's because he would make a good leash for them and she trusts him more than anyone. It's subtle, barely noticeable, but it's a very tame version of how Makima manipulates. We actually see a much more intense version of this in the very next chapter when Makima reworks Denji's perception of intimacy and affection, then provides it to him only to make a request that he is significantly less likely to reject now that they've shared a connection. Quote, "It's difficult to understand another person's heart, so take your time studying her hands. How long are her fingers? Are her palms cold or warm? How are her ears shaped? Have you ever had your finger bitten? Memorize it. Know it so well that even if you lose your vision, you'll recognize me by my bite. I have a favor to ask you. Can I? I want you to defeat the Gun Devil." If you're caught up on part 1, then I also suggest going to read Makima's monologue later in chapter 82 for the clearest version of this expression of manipulation. But this type of manipulation, this version of cunning from a villain, feels starkly different from Kenjaku, whose plans don't rely on manipulating the emotions of a person on an intimate level consistently, though he does do it on occasion, but by setting the course of their life in the right direction. Take a look at how he breaks down his plan for attack on Shibuya in chapter 53. Quote, "This is just a theory, but there's a landmine for Sukuna among the students. Worst case scenario, if we were to trigger it, our plan might be over. If that happens, we should just kidnap Itadori. He's just a pawn for us anyway." No. Itadori and Sukuna himself are a bomb to us and Jujutsu High. We shouldn't set it off until the moment we need the most chaos. On October 31st in Shibuya, we need to prepare ourselves for sealing Gojo Satoru with everything we've got. We'll have a few sorcerers with us. Juzo, he's disposable, he's not the type to follow instructions, so he'll get in the way. While there are elements of emotional and personal manipulation, overall the way that we see his hands in the narrative is on a much grander scale. He's planning niche interactions months, years in advance, and always recharting the courses of entire lives to match up with what he wants. Where Makima uses intimacy, Kenjaku uses entire environmental manipulation to further his goals. And this leads me to the second major distinction that I think causes these two to feel so different despite filling the same role, which is how present they are in the narrative. While it would be unfair to say that Kenny isn't present in the narrative, it isn't unfair to say that in terms of screen time and direct interaction with the audience and the characters, he's seen far less than Makima. The presence of Kenjaku is something that is felt more than seen. This is in large part to the environmental broad stroke type of manipulation that we just talked about. Since the tension of mystery around Kenny is what exactly he's doing and what it's leading to and not how his manipulation directly affects our main characters, it's more beneficial for the audience to know very little about him. However, we do get to see small scenes of him setting things in motion and the direct consequences of that. Shibuya, the death paintings, the goodwill event, disaster curses, Mahito, the traffic blocking 5 roads on the way to work are all splash effects of his background influence. On the other hand, Makima's influence is much more present, and I think this is actually the main reason we see so much comparison between Makima and Gojo as opposed to Gojo and Kishibe or Makima and Kenjaku. The person hiding in the shadows in JJK is Kenny, but the person there in CSM is Kishibe. Therefore, the ones operating in the light and holding their narratives, themes, and worlds together become Gojo and Makima, despite them on being opposite narrative sides. The similarities between those two also grow stronger when you take a look at the main casts: Gojo, Yuji, Nobara, and Megumi compared to Makima, Denji, Power, and Aki. They both carry a lot of direct influence within their distinct organization, and both are advancing their plans very directly, whereas their opposites, Kishibe and Kenjaku, work in the background. And this makes sense as well when you add it to Makima's specific type of manipulation. Just like how Kenjaku's secrecy added to the broad stroke splash effect of his actions, Makima's dominating presence over the narrative adds to her emotional manipulation. Just take a look at chapter 61 of Chainsaw Man, in which Kishibe is forced to communicate through written words in the middle of a conversation. Makima's direct and inescapable presence isn't just an element of her manipulation style, but an omnipresent threat to the entire series as a whole, almost as omnipresent as my obsession with Berserk. Yeah, editor, can you include a clip of me getting shot in the head? These two previous distinctions also funnel perfectly into their overall grander goal within their narrative, which I think is actually the true core thing that causes the expressions of their shared trope to feel so different. And that thing is their motivation and their grand goal. First, let's take a look at Kenjaku. Toward the end of Season 2 or Chapter 136 of the manga, Kenjaku goes out to explain his grand desires and goals in full, saying, quote, "I do not wish for a world without cursed spirits, or an idyllic, peaceful world. Non-sorcerers, sorcerers, cursed spirits, these are all possibilities of cursed energy in the form of human beings, and yet there must be more to human potential. I tried to bring that forth myself, but that doesn't work. What I can create does not exceed the bounds of my own potential. The answer is always flickering darkly in the chaos. Do you understand? What I should have created was chaos that not even I could control." And you can probably see where this is going. Kenjaku is a character whose foresight and ability to orchestrate entire generations is flawless to the extent that there is never anything outside of his rule. Earlier in the chapter, Yuki suggests that the next step for mankind is to shed itself from cursed energy entirely, but that cannot work for Kenjaku, which is why he outright rejects it. Because he can control simple humans effortlessly, but he could never control the evolved form of humanity, the next step of human nature. To achieve this, he has needed to work in the shadows, never showing himself in the spotlight as to not obstruct the development of mankind with his rule and allowing them the flexibility for generations of grafting a plan. All of it is done to create a chaotic world, a world where everything is outside of his own control and humanity has freely evolved. For those who have read Chainsaw Man, the distinction I'm going to make here is probably already very obvious to you, but before we get to that, I'd like to ask that if you enjoy this type of content to maybe consider subscribing and giving some feedback in the comments or showing you enjoyed this with a like. Also, the upcoming sections regarding Chainsaw Man will include spoilers from the manga up to the end of part 1, so if you're looking to steer clear, now is the time to click off, and thank you for watching. Now that I won't spoil anyone, obviously when comparing Kenny's goal to Makima, there is a clear contrast. Makima is the control devil. It's in her nature. Her very essence is to control people and environments down to the minute detail. In chapter 84, she talks to Hishibe, saying, quote, "I have the power to control those I believe to be lesser than myself. If I fight Chainsaw Man and win, I should be able to control him. I want to use Chainsaw Man to create a better world. Take, for example, death, war, hunger. There are many things in this world that humanity would be happier without. With the Chainsaw Man's power, I'll blot them all out." Where Kenjaku seeks chaos, Makima seeks control, and this is something I think that is really incredible and beautiful about storytelling. On the surface, if you use basic descriptors, you can point to Kenny and Makima as similar, but based on this small fundamental distinction, how their characters are textured and layered become completely different. Just think about how that core difference between control and chaos actually led them to the other distinctions we talked about earlier. For Kenny, the drive to create chaos on a grand scale causes for larger, more broad-stroked plans which require him to work more privately. And because of that, his manipulation over the narrative makes more sense when done, shifting the entire course of lives to interact and set each other off in a perfect way. For Makima, her need to control is expressed perfectly through her domineering ears and eyes over the narrative, which sets up her manipulation tactics to be much more personal and intimate to whoever she is trying to unravel. All in all, I think that the reason they aren't compared to directly as much as you might think upon initial preview is because although they share a similar archetype, they are completely different characters. And you can see this even when you hold them up against other great mastermind-like characters from anime. A lot of the great ones will mix different elements of the classic mastermind-esque characteristics from their central conflict or identity. I actually encourage you to do something like this for yourself and see how interesting things can get. Johan from Monster, Bleach's Aizen, L, and Light, or heck even Eren from Attack on Titan majorly have their take on the mastermind manipulators shift and bend to complement whatever they're doing in the story. Anyway, if you enjoyed this comparison and video, you might like some of our other works like the Denji and Yuji video we just put out. And until next time, keep dreaming.